Forward to the club. All right, great. Well, welcome. Glad you're here. We're sort of making a little bit of a transition here over the next couple of weeks, stepping outside the Christian communion or Christian faith and looking at some other practices throughout the world, other religious contexts and faith series, and also to compare them to our Lutheran understandings of the faith. So today we're starting with Buddhism, which of course originates out of Asia. Honestly, I do not know a lot about Buddhism. I know that meditation can be a big part of it. I thought about maybe having some incense in my office and starting with some just meditation, but that doesn't, I think I might do a little bit of that tomorrow in our class, but it doesn't quite work as well on Zoom. So at any rate, so I'm not going to do that. But I do know that meditation is a big part of it. My only real experience with Buddhism at all is in traveling to Japan. I think some of you know that my wife was born in Japan, her mother was Japanese, and so we've been there, I don't know, 8 or 9 times. Her entire maternal side is there. And the one interesting thing is that she has a cousin who essentially is a pastor in the Buddhist faith, except that they're a version of Buddhism called Tenri or Tenriko. It's sometimes called out of Nara. Now, it is not Buddhism per se, but they have a lot of the same principle that Buddhism does. So we often, when we're there, we stay with them down in Kyushu, which is the southern island. And when we're down there, they get up every day for worship, right at sunrise, and they have another worship in evening every day. So whenever we're there, they ring a bell, everybody who's there comes to worship. And so they have different festival days. So we don't usually visit them, like they have pilgrimage during East, like we would have Easter and Christmas and big holidays like that. And so when we go, we stay in what is essentially a guest house for pilgrims. And what's nice about it is we sort of have the whole place to ourselves and, with a bedroom and showers and bathroom facilities. And they have a great big dining hall. So she can have all her family over there, aunts and uncles and cousins. We'll have about 20 or 25 people, and we have a perfect space to serve them because they're used to serving, up to 100 people in this fellowship hall, sort of like our fellowship hall kind of thing. So that's my only real experience with them. Throughout Japan, of course, there are lots of shrines, Shinto and Buddhist, Shinto, which is a form of Buddhism, and where people can go and pray. And so there's incense. And the interesting thing to me is in all those places, there's always a ritual washing that occurs. And that's true with Muslim faith, it's true with Buddhism, and of course, Christianity, baptism, and these water images I've seen throughout the world in different faiths. But what I thought might be helpful before we get into all the study is just to go around, and I don't know if anybody here has had any experience with Buddhism at all, or if I say Buddhism, what do you think of? And so let's, Amanda, anything? Not really?
I think of the artwork, like when I go to a museum and I see like the sculptures and things. I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind, but I don't know anyone that's Buddhist or
Yeah.
have.
I do sort of associate with some peacefulness, like the shrines that I've been to. There's always nature is always incorporated. There's sort of a peacefulness and what do I want to say, a calmness about the shrines and things that I've been to.
Serenity.
So yeah, serenity. That's a good word for it. Pete, anything
Nope,
experiences?
don't
Okay.
know anybody Buddhist. I've never really been much exposed to it. It makes me think of, people in like robes sitting and
Right.
just
The
contemplating
monks.
things.
Yes.
But that's about it.
Okay. Well, you may know somebody who's a Buddhist, but may not know it also. It's possible, like somebody at work or something, who knows. So sometimes they don't all wear the orange robes. Those are the monks. So yes, they are definitely visible. Eric and Heidi, I don't know if you're together there or separate, or I see separate things.
We are together, just not in the same room right now. So,
Okay.
I got nothing on the Buddhist. I know like the statues and I don't know, is that the little statue with the big belly? I don't know.
Well, that's one of them. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I know they have, if you've ever noticed too, I learned this goes in Japan. They have a lot of times they have those things in their hair. They're sort of like brain balls, and I guess the more of them they have, the more intelligent that Buddha statue is one of the things I learned. But I mean, I don't know a lot about it either. So, okay, Heidi, anything, or I don't know if you're at your computer right now? Linda, any knowledge about Buddhism?
Not really. I always thought it was more of a way of life instead of a religion, though.
Well, I think that's also true. I think that comes out in the reading for today as well. That it's sort of because there's an inclusion to it. I don't think they would have it like the Buddhists that I know in Japan. They have no trouble with Christian, trouble inviting us to. Oops, am I still there?
No,
Your voice is, but your
Voice
face has
is,
disappeared.
but who knows what's going on? You can still hear me though.
yes.
Yes.
Well, maybe it'll come back on. I'm not sure what happened. This happened one other time. I don't know why. So we'll see. See if I can get it fixed for next time. As long as you can hear me, you don't need to see me. So, but maybe it'll hop back on here or something. Who do we have? Barbara. I didn't cut Linda. I didn't cut you off. Did you? You had spoken.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
The only thing I know of is Siddhartha from when
Yeah.
I took a college psych class or something.
Yeah, Hermann Hesse's novel about Buddhism. Yes,
Right.
I read that years ago too, but I don't remember any of it. I
Me
just remember. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's sort of take a look here a little bit about and again, I'm learning along with you for some of these. Some of them I know more about, but some of them I don't at all. I think one of the things that they really try to emphasize in our study book is just that Buddhism has sort of an openness and inclusion. And I think it was this Linda was saying is it's a way of life. It's a way of sort of looking at the universe and trying to live a life in which, while life is difficult and hard, it's a way of sort of calming down and easing your way into what is going to be suffering that is involved in living. The historical Buddha, I didn't know a lot about this one. Of course, his name was Siddhartha, but it's also Gautama Buddha. You'll notice it's very, very old. This is older than the Judeo-Christian tradition. We place the Jewish scriptures, yeah, I mean, it's different, but I would say 300 to 400 is what we're looking at as far as a time. BC is when we start to get those scriptures and sort of forming of what we know as Judaism. So this even goes back, later than that. It does mention that he was a person of somewhat. Let me see here. There, I'm back. Okay, you got me now.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't know why that happened, but you got me now. But he was a person of some substance. He came from. I think it's fair to say he came from a wealthy family, and at some point in his life, he got married, and then at age 29, he decided to leave his home and family, which he did have a child. It sounds like, which I thought that part of it was a little weird, like just to walk out on your family, but I guess the spiritual calling meant more to him. And then basically for quite a bit of time, he sort of wandered around, looking at different religions and different practices throughout the area he was in. He was sort of like on the Nepal-India border. And then after all of this, he came up with his own sort of ideas. And so I want to take a look at a little bit of this. He lived a long life. If you think somebody back in this time was 80 years old, living, this is 500 years before Christ. That's a pretty good life. Like Methuselah in the Old Testament. He has these what we call the noble truths, which you can see here. There's 4 of them. The number one thing is that life is suffering. That in the midst of our lives there is suffering. This is a little bit Lutheran because Lutherans talk about how sin is a condition of life, that we live within this sinfulness. So this hardness to life. So that's the first truth, is that life is suffering. The second one is also sort of interesting in that there's a reason for suffering. So yes, you're suffering, but it also, there's a purpose to it. And if you think about what we, as I'm trying to put it in a Christian context, we believe also, I think, that there's reasons that things happen. Now, it's not always directly assigned, or we don't always know it at the time why things have happened. But sometimes as we look back at our lives, I think we can see things that happen to us and all of understand, sort of why that might have happened and how working through that may have made us better people over time. I'll just use a little analogy here because it's so present. Many people think that the best thing that happened to the Buckeyes this year was that they lost to Michigan, and that Michigan broke their hearts. And that's the reason now that they're national champions, because they suffered. Now, whether you believe that or not, it's up to you. I don't even know if you're sports fans or not, but it's that kind of idea that that moment when they were highly favored, they're at home, and basically they get beat by their rival. What happened in that moment was they said never again. And that then put them on a trajectory to do better, which they did during the playoffs. Are you with me here? Is this craziness? You hear people talk about this. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, or whether they just played better and laid an egg against Michigan. I don't know. But sometimes I think we look back on our lives. I have a friend that I recently talked to who went through some difficult times about 5 years ago and didn't understand why. But what happened in his life was then he ended up going to graduate school and graduating, and now has a good career in engineering. But I think at the time, some of the events that happened 5 years ago, he didn't understand why he was suffering so. And yet that suffering caused him to change some things in his life so that now he's in a better place to do the work that God has given him to do, which he believes is engineering. So I think sometimes I think at the time, it's not always easy. Like at the time we're suffering, we don't always want to put a reason on it, or we don't always understand it. But sometimes when we get some distance on our lives, certainly in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we think of the 40 years that the Jewish people spent in the wilderness, built them together as a people. We think of Jesus, 40 days in the wilderness, not years, but days. It sort of formed him and got him ready. That happened right after he was baptized. It was really sort of the beginning of his ministry. So sometimes what we see as trials or sufferings in our life can sometimes help us down the road. So that's sort of, I think, present in this. So there's a reason for this suffering. Number three is there's a way to end it. Like we can get a grip off it, and the way to end suffering then is this eightfold path that they have here. So suffering is present in life. You're suffering for a reason, but there's a way to change it. And the way to change it is to enter into this, what he calls the eightfold path. So, I mean, this is some religion, some psychology thrown in here, a little bit of everything, maybe a way of living. So in this eightfold path, you can see that it has to do with wisdom, morality, and concentration, that you have the right views, that you read the Buddha's writings, that you have the right aspirations, that you try to live in a new way, right speech, tell the truth, don't lie or gossip. You might know some of these things come from the Ten Commandments too, right? Right conduct, a good moral behavior. All right. Am I still
Went
on?
away again. Nope. Now
I
you're
don't know
back.
why it does. Who knows?
Maybe you
I
need
do
to
have a stop.
contemplate the camera.
I know. Well, it's giving me suffering. So how do I get out of this? Yeah. And then it has a right livelihood, about honestly living. I think it's interesting here that also as part of that is you are to live in a way to not cause suffering to others. So your good life or your way of living it's really only on the way to enlightenment, and if it's a way of living that doesn't destroy other people. So if you have to climb on the backs of other people or put people down in order to raise yourself up, that would not be a Buddhist way of doing. Then concentration, right effort, perseverance and goodness, and clearing the mind. I think that's why often we see these shrines in nature, this idea of getting outside yourself. Right mindfulness, attentive to reality in the present moment, and then right meditation, concentrating on Buddha and Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, as a way of doing that. And of course, as a Lutheran and as someone who my whole life I've always valued prayer and worship. I mean, if you think of worship, especially some of our daily offices like morning prayer, evening prayer, there's a settling to those. Okay. I mean, we have a service in the church called Compline that sometimes I will use before I go to bed at night. Lord, grant us quiet night and sleep at the last. And there's just sort of a pacing and a breathing. I think good prayer is like that there can be sort of a pacing to it. I know in worship, we're always in a hurry to get to the other thing. It's being recorded and this is coming, blah, blah, blah. But one thing I like in my own prayer life is that I use that time also to breathe. And what I mean by that is that when I do my prayer, most of my prayer in the morning, I do say prayers at night, but in the morning when I look over my prayer list, I see a name or an event on my own personal prayer list, and I always say it out loud, and then I stop. And then I go to the next prayer. And it has always been from, now people pray differently, so I'm not saying that's and or different things work for different people, but for me, it causes me to slow down. I like to be going and doing, but when I pray, it allows me the opportunity to breathe, to slow down, to think about what needs this person might be having today, what grief this person or family is going through. But it's done with a rhythm. I'm an early riser, so for me, it's one of the first things I do in the morning. I get a cup of coffee, I sit down on the couch, my dog probably thinks I'm nuts, and I go over my personal prayer list. That's the way I do it. People do many different things. I know people that like to pray when they drive. And so they have their prayer list there and they think of a name, they drive for a little, radio's off and stuff. Whatever works for you. But for me, praying and asking God to fill my life means slowing down, because usually I can hardly sit still for 5 seconds. So it just forces me. And you can see that sort of a Buddhist way that you're aware of what's going on. If you think about breathing, it's being aware of your body and who you are, and it can help us to do these things. I did like that in looking at these, that all of these elements are not to be practiced simultaneously. I mean, they're all to be practiced simultaneously. There's not a linear progression. So this idea that we are speaking in ways that are benefiting other people, that we're not lying, that we're working in an occupation that doesn't hurt others. All of that is done all the time. It's not like, okay, right now I'm not killing anybody, so I've got that commandment covered, but I am talking, behind their back. So, oops, that one's broken. It's sort of we do them simultaneously. Okay. All of this, of course, is done then to eventually weigh what Buddha taught as a way of moderation, or a middle way. I'm looking at the top of page 19 here. Okay. All right. And you can see this in people like these monks and other people that praying. There does seem to be a serenity, I think I may have used that word, or a calmness to people that I think it gives them something. Some other things that I just thought were interesting about other Buddhist concepts. This idea of karma, which I think is something we all know about, has come to us, that good karma and bad karma, and the idea of, you reap what you sow. So, and I also, it's interesting that they don't necessarily think that all of this is going to be determined in this life. So just because you think that someone's evil and they're getting away with it, doesn't mean they get away with it for eternity. It may be that over time things do come back to get them. So this idea of karma, I think we have a little bit of that in our Christian tradition. Although I guess I would finally say that God's karma is to love us when we don't do the right thing, and it's not about retribution and punishment. But I think most of us have this idea that if you do good, good things will also come to you. And if you do bad, that's also going to come to you, right? I mean, it's not in the Bible that way, but I'm just saying most of us sort of have that idea about being fair to one another and things. And if you're not, it's going to come get you. This meditation and egolessness. Again, if you think about some of these things, Western versus Eastern, this whole idea of egolessness is very different from the Western notion in which individuality is important. All right, and who you are, and that you have your freedoms and you need to get that out and be who you are, be all that you can be, this kind of thing. That's more of a Western notion. Eastern ideas are more sort of the community, the lack of self. So let me just give you a couple of examples that I know about. Where my wife comes from in Japan, her family, their family name is first. Your name is second. So my wife's actual name in Japan would be Miyata. That's her family name. Then it would be her name. Miyata Kazuko Sharon would be her name in Japanese. In the United States, of course, we flip that. I'm not Morris John, I'm John Morris. We have our first name first, right? And it's sort of it seems like a funny thing, but it also says something about the culture that putting others first and the family and the society is always more important than you are. You know what I mean? Now that can be bad too. I mean that's not necessarily all good. There's ditches on that side of the world too. But this idea of the family and unity. The first time that we ever traveled to Japan was the year we were married in 1985. So we were married in June and we went to Japan that August. While we were in Japan, there was a massive airline crash inside of Japan. It was like a 747, went down, like 400 people died. It was horrible. Didn't affect us at all because we were already there. Although my mom had to call us from America to make sure we were okay because we're on every plane in Japan or something. I don't know. At any rate, she was worried. We were fine. Both the president of that airline and the Secretary of Transportation from Japan committed suicide after that happened. They did it because they believed that somehow they had to bear the weight of what they had done for the families that had died. Now, I just want you to think about that for a second. I don't ever recall something like that happening in America. What happens in America is when there's a tragedy, we try to point fingers and decide whose fault it was or it was the weather. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Cover it up.
Cover it up. These fires in LA, why wasn't there water? What about the water pressure? Weren't we supposed to fix that? The fire department saying you didn't give us what we wanted. You know what I mean? This goes, when there's a tragedy, there's usually blaming going on. There's not this idea that you have to take responsibility for that. So it was just a very interesting thing. The other thing, and this is very strange, but my wife pointed it out because I do it all the time. When you peel a potato, okay, so you got a potato. Let's say my iPhone is my potato. I peel a potato like this, right? Peel, 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 flip, peel, peel, peel. That's not the way they do it in Japan. In Japan, if you're cutting something, it's always toward you. So they would cut it this way because you don't want to. If someone gets injured because you slip, it comes into you. You're not going this way where you'd hit somebody else. Do you see what I'm saying? I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but do you understand it's a different it's a totally different mentality about how, and I see this in Buddhism, how is the other more important than me? All right. And how in America, we've always stressed individuality and the importance of the individual, which by the way is also a very good thing. I'm not trying it's not, but when you have always that, what can raise up in your society is sort of grotesque egoism or ego centrality. Do you know what I mean? Where you get egotists are what happens. In other societies, the ditch can be that someone's just a cog in the wheel. You know what I'm saying? They're a cog in the machine. So the individual life doesn't matter as much as long as the function of the society is kept. Are you with me? So that's their problem. Our problem is we have too much of me, right? They're different sides of the coin, and hopefully you can blend some of those things together. All right. I want to look at this development of Buddhism, where they talk about the three baskets, if you caught that, things that they put together or things that they want to make sure that they have. Okay, there's trice baskets. It talks about how they got a big boost in the 3rd century BC when the king of India attained it. By the way, the exact same thing happened in Christianity. As you may know, in 325, when Constantine declared that the Christianity is going to be the official religion of the Roman Empire, that helped Christianity a lot when the kings said that's going to be. So that's a similar thing too. It's slow to come to America. Buddhism came. It came through the West. Of course, there's also some Enlightenment poets and others who thought it. The Zen Buddhism, which came out of Japan, struck a chord with a lot of people in the 60s and 70s. Okay. We also had some writers, if you see there at the bottom of page 20, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Gary Snyder, Robert Prissig. I mean, those people helped. The writer here does point out that all of them were white. So it was a sort of a 60s thing, some of that. And of course, a lot of Buddhism is not visible because it's a sort of a private thing or a way of life. Okay. Any discussion about those things? And then I want to look at this chart.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was reading through this, and I found this a little hard to follow because it's so different from anything we've done.
There's such a wealth of information. I sometimes will also try to look at other sources and it just to try to get some handle. But there's a ton of information about this. Yeah. So this is a little bit of a I think we could have a book.
Yeah. Oh, you're frozen there.
You're not, Pete.
Yeah. But I was thinking, I don't know if Pastor John can hear me or not. As I was going through that when you hit that table of comparisons at the end, boy, that's going to be really different from anything we've seen so far. Because there's nothing in here that's like, how does a church service compare? Because it's just not there.
Right.
I wonder if the similarity is how we're supposed to treat people.
Okay, we lost him entirely now. I think he needs a new computer or something. This thing keeps messing up, and also he's got a huge lag between what his lips are doing and what his voice is saying.
Right.
Well, the box is back. He says he can't get back on. Oh. Well, when you disappeared, I was saying that as I was reading through this, I was thinking that when we get to that comparison chart, it's going to be way different than anything we've seen before, because this isn't anything like a worship service like we're familiar with.
His words are
Okay.
showing up.
Yeah, he says, let's go to the chart, which is on page 22. Yes, he says, notice that creation is not part of their doctrine. Says they understand God as the ultimate reality and the all, and are not concerned with how the universe was created. Whereas Lutheran says believe in a personal triune God, Father, Creator, Son, Redeemer, and Holy Spirit, Sanctifier. Number 4 is interesting. They believe all people have a Buddha nature, the potential to become a Buddha or a something. I have no idea how you pronounce that. Like the Gautama Buddha or Jesus. That was one of the problems I had reading through this, is all these words that I can't really pronounce even in my head.
Right.
For Lutherans, it says, believe Jesus is the unique Son of God. We are encouraged to imitate his faithfulness. Our salvation was won through his death and resurrection, which I guess is similar in some point. But yeah, I don't think our resurrection is quite the same as their reincarnation, though. Can everybody see the chat text that is
Mhm.
coming up?
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't really go into it doesn't really go into the details of the resurrection. I know some people think you come back as a cow or a mouse or whatever, or maybe a different person. I don't know. I don't know how they believe that works. Hmm. So if you didn't live a good life, you might come back as a weasel or something. Oh, a stone, boy, that would be. You'd have a very long life, but it would be a really boring one. Yeah, we were saying while you were gone that you might need to contemplate a new computer or a new camera or something, because you definitely have problems with that one. Yes, and I would hope that the camera and the microphone work for that.
I was telling Pastor John before we got started that my sister-in-law sent me I don't know, a video of it was a service of prayer for the nation today that was at the National Cathedral in Washington. I thought it was excellent. And I don't know if you guys have a chance to watch it, but I would highly recommend it. Of course, everything she said, I believed. So of course I liked it, but it was uplifting, I think, for our nation. Great. Sounds good.
Yes, well, and there's some suffering, but maybe the reason is to get better equipment.
There you go. Stay warm, you guys.
You too.
Oh, I have to go into the office tomorrow morning, and it's supposed to be below zero, so I'm not looking forward to that.
Well, be safe.
8 below tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Bye all.